Keep going. Keep going.
Okay.
And me.
Did y'all hear that? Then I'm recording for Jennifer this morning, so, just so you know, you're.
Finish your fingers out here.
Same.
I just listen to that.
Sure.
Share.
We'll, go ahead and call the meeting to order. We anticipate that Jackie's gonna be here.
She sent a text, didn't she?
Yeah, that she's running a little bit behind. Haven't heard from Techie yet, so maybe he's tied up this morning. But, we'll go ahead and, try to move through this as quick as we can. That's Jackie. We'll wait. There she is. So, I want to thank everybody for taking your time this morning, and looking forward to what Shannon's got to share with us, and perhaps Brandon too. So, thank you. We'll get started, Shannon.
Okay, I actually requested this meeting just so that we could kind of keep up to date on some of the changes that we're having that's come down from the state, which is item number 1 on the agenda there, which is new drinking water regulations. It's passed the House and the state Senate, so it will go into effect January the 1st. Every drinking fountain, every faucet that kids could possibly come in contact with has to be tested for lead. That is something that just started. You'll see I did include the House bill and the Senate bill in there as well. The drawback to this is you have to notify TDEC within 10 days if it tests out of the constraints that they set. And then the repairs are supposed to be completed within 90 days. Now I do know we have several older buildings, and we kind of want to get ahead of this before it actually starts, because 90 days if you do run into a problem, 90 days is not a long time to accomplish repairs on an entire building if we do have that problem. I don't foresee that being a problem. However, if you remember not too far back, Rogersville Water District actually had the same problem with lead in the water. So if we get ahead of it now, we can actually find out if the problem is on our side or on the supplier's side. Because then it puts it back on to the water district that we're getting our water from. That's basically it on it. I just wanted y'all to know there is some money out there that's supposed to be coming down the pipeline, but as with state money, you know how that goes. So it doesn't require us to use a third party to test these. In my opinion, we're better off if we use a third party lab. That way, if somebody comes and says, well, you said this didn't have lead in it. No, we didn't say it didn't have lead in it. We had a third party do it, and that takes us out of the equation.
If I may, First Utility District had sampled some of the water at my request about 4 years ago at Churchill Middle School. And they did it to these same specifications at no cost. So maybe reach out to First Utility District and Persia Water. I guess it's Persia Water that services.
Is it
Persia.
My community, it does.
volunteer?
Yeah.
It would be, Rogersville City would do the rest
Yeah.
of the school.
Yeah, maybe go ahead and let them do the test.
I mean, with it being free, that's definitely an option, but I don't, do we want to get the supplier that's supplying the water involved in testing the water that we're using? That's kind of like us testing our own. I know it's a cost, But to me, having an independent laboratory tested is probably, I'm just looking to protect us, you know.
You said every fountain, not just every school, but every
No,
fountain?
every single fountain, every single faucet, you have to take a sample from every single one, not just,
Bathroom.
yeah, you can't, well, the pipes, a lot of the old water fountains, which I think most of ours are new enough that we don't have to worry about. And we do not have to worry about any school that was built after July of 1986. And actually, you know, we were talking about it, I think I spoke to Bob about it, that, you know, everybody thinks that galvanized lines are the bad part. Galvanized lines are really not the bad part. The bad part is actually copper lines that are before 1986, because in 1986, they changed the regulations to have lead-free solder. The solder is where you get more of the lead in your water than you do actually through galvanized, because galvanized usually scales or rust on the inside, and you don't get so much lead. You know, if it sits for a while, you'll have dirty water, you know, but it, where you get more problem is with copper. So I don't foresee us having a big problem other than, well, we won't know till we check. I'll just be honest with you.
Can you get us a price on what an independent lab would charge us?
And we'll collect the samples and send them
Right,
off.
right.
But you're looking at $20 to $30 a sample. So it can get costly, especially the high schools. I mean, because you're talking, like, at every bathroom, you have 2 water fountains. You gotta test both. You can't just test one.
You got the labs.
So, in the bathrooms, you'll have to check every faucet. So if you have 6 laboratories there, you gotta check all 6 of them.
Once you call a lab, they'll send you the vials to put them in.
We currently use for water testing, Kingsport City actually does a lot of our water sampling for Clinch, drinking water. But I would send it to the ones that we use for our sewer or our drinking water that we have to send off once a month, which is Microbac or ESC, either one of the 2 independent labs. And we can, because it does not state that we have to, that we can't test it ourselves. We could get the utility districts to come and check each one of them, and if we run into a problem, then send it off.
That's not
Yeah.
good.
You know,
That's-
that's, because you have to retest it. After you make the repairs, you have to retest it. And this is gonna be an annual thing. It's gonna have to be done every single year.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah.
So that could save us some money.
Yeah.
Use them until we
Okay.
find a problem, if we do have a problem.
So how many suppliers do we have? First Utility, Rogersville, and Persia, is that the 3 main ones?
Mooresburg Utility District.
Mooresburg.
Well,
4. Okay.
Shannon, what kind of money did they say might be coming in?
That is actually in that, that's in that paperwork that I gave you. It's in the fiscal note there on the second part of it. They increased the state expenditures and the local expenditures both, so it's all in there. Now, how much of that is actually gonna make it to our district? I'm not sure.
What's ASD mean? What's that acronym?
Where you see that?
Achievement School District contains at least 25 schools built before 1986. That's just, its own reference right there. I think.
Okay. Yeah, currently, it's page 2.
Yeah, I found it, thanks.
Russellville, Whitesburg is another utility district. It's hidden in the gap.
Bulls Gap, yeah. So, we're quite spread out between the utility districts.
Did we ever get all of those bottle filling stations put in every school?
There's bottle filling stations at every school, and we're actually going on our second round of bottle filling stations.
Replacing?
No, come from Coordinated School Health. She ordered one bottle filling station for every school. And
We allocated that, what, about 6 months ago?
The second round, you mean more?
yeah, more
Not
bottle
replacing.
filling stations, yeah.
Gotcha.
That seems to be very popular. I know the one at, well, take for instance, Churchill Middle School's right outside the gym. That thing gets used tremendously. So,
But they put that in before,
no,
that was in prior to us allocating the money. Yes, it was.
I put it in
But-
through Coordinated School Health.
But before,
But that might,
yeah,
this has been done in step, I think the
Yeah.
first time she only bought like 4,
and then it was.
and then she bought
Oh, to the
12, yeah,
Yeah.
and now she's gonna try to get some more of those as well, to spread them out. We tried to get them as close to the gymnasiums as we could, when we did those. Now, I think we're gonna move more toward the cafeterias and put them, close to the cafeterias, and that way you can get them there as well. But yeah, those are very, very popular.
Are you gonna wait till January the 1st to start this, or are you gonna go
I
ahead?
would like to get ahead of it, because right now, we can test it, and if we find a problem, we can go ahead and fix that problem now.
Yeah.
And we have our time. If we wait till January 1, we have to report it in 10 days and have it fixed in 90. So, to me, it makes more sense to get ahead of it and try to see if we do. I don't foresee a whole lot unless it's old water fountains. Old water fountains are notorious to have lead solder in them. The actual tank, a lot of those old tanks were lead lined. So, I don't foresee a real big problem, but I'm not saying there's not gonna be, but I don't, the biggest problem is gonna be getting them all tested. But I'd like to get ahead of it so that if we do find a problem, we can take care of it on our time right now.
So your office will contact the utility districts and
Yes,
do the preliminary, Brandon or somebody? Gotcha.
yeah, we'll see if they'll do that for us. Like I say, first utility district up here they're pretty awesome about helping us on pretty much anything we need.
Bulls Gap?
That actually comes from from Russellville, so that's good. But
This have to be approved through the board to allow them to do that.
it should.
It's just normal maintenance, I would assume. What your all's thoughts?
Yeah.
He's got a budget.
Yeah, as long as the costs don't get too prohibitive. Now, if we find that we're gonna have to replace every water line in
Yeah.
a school, yeah, I'll be coming back to you.
Yeah.
We'll be hearing from you.
Yeah, you'll be hearing from me. But, all the new, and the new sections of the schools, anything built after 1986, we don't have to test. So, if you're looking at, the intermediate school, JRP, Clinch, the new section at Churchill Middle, anything built after 1986. Let's
Just freshman
just put it that way.
wings.
Freshman wings, We don't have to test anything in those, but we do have to test everything prior to that. So a lot of these we're gonna be skipping around, and there's a lot of the areas that we won't have to test, but those we do have to test.
But off-site, bus shop and central office, and we don't get into all of our other buildings, do we?
No, as long as it, you know, a lot of these bills are more geared toward students. It's a lot like OSHA is with employees. That protects the employees, but it don't protect the employer. Like, if I own the company, I can jump up on a roof with nothing on, no fall protection or anything. They don't care. But if one of my employees does it, they'll fine me. You know, it's kind of the same deal. It's made to protect the lower, you know, the lowest tier of that.
Good.
So, any questions on any of that?
Do we collect the samples, or does the water utility district do it?
I don't know what they'll want to do. We can collect the samples. We do that now with Clinch, with all of our sewer plants. We can collect the samples. They will have to be marked accordingly. We'll have to keep up with what fountain it comes out of, you know, because it could be localized to one water fountain. Which, if it's that way, that's a simple fix. You pull the water fountain off, put a new water fountain on. You know, it's not that big a deal. But yes, we can do it, but I'm not sure what they'll want to do. They may want to collect it themselves. I would assume not. I would bet that we'll end up collecting it.
It'll be kind of tricky just cataloging where everything came from.
Yeah, that's going to be another issue is trying to keep everything separated as this came from here, this came from here, this came from here. Oh yeah, we'll have to
That's
have
what I do.
we'll have to have a
Number
floor
each one.
plan and number every single faucet. Because it's not just water fountains, it's faucets, it's fountains, it's anything that a kid could consume while they're in the building. Heck, even goes to kitchen. Every kitchen, anything that they might cook with has to be tested. So. Any other questions on that one? All right. Next was the VHS press box, coaches boxes, and grandstand. This has been going on for a while. As some of y'all know, if you've been to a game here, especially after a big rain, we end up with mud at the bottom of the grandstands. That's been going on for how many years, Chris?
Since it was built.
Yeah, several years, like 30. So,
At one time, the Army Corps of Engineers were requested to come in and take that bottom section of bleachers out and re-stabilize all of that, but it just never came to fruition, and nothing's been done since then.
The actual grandstands, the seating area seems to be stable. It's not moving. However, the dirt because those are pre-engineered, pre-stressed sections of bleacher. They sit on a grade beam and on a grade beam, and nothing touches in the middle. If you'll notice, when you look from the bottom, when we go out there, we'll see it. They actually have an arc to them. So when you load that bleacher, it sits down level. It doesn't sag. The grade beams seem to be stable. The problem is, between those grade beams, the dirt has washed out onto the track, onto the lower part of the bleachers. It's washed quite a bit. Now, with that being said, at first we thought that it just affected the front section of the press box, and that the lintel above all the windows that you look out of the press box had just rotated, which would have been a simple fix. But after getting into trying to get some specifications and stuff to fix it and actually looking, that front section from the back of the concession stand forward has actually started to rotate slightly. So the foundation on the press box side of that building is actually falling. There is a way to fix it, which he's working on now. We actually did this with the 200 section over here. We actually had the same problem on the 200 section. They'll come in with auger type piers, and they actually screw these things in the ground till they hit bedrock, which at the stands it'll be the base of the stands, which is about 32 feet. So they'll screw in the ground 32 feet, and then they actually have jacks on them, and we'll actually jack that foundation back up. It's not cheap. I won't try to say it is. It's going to be probably between $2,500 to $3,000 per pier. We're looking right now at putting one of those every 4 feet. So just in piers alone, you're probably talking $60,000. And then by the time we do the other things that need to be fixed on the actual press box, somewhere around $100,000 for the press box. Just for the press box. Now, if we don't eliminate the problem that is causing the foundation to sink, it's kind of it's a loss. You know, it's wasted money. So, and I actually did one of these projects for Dobbins Bennett. They had a very similar problem on their old concrete bleachers. The space in between of those panels, it's a open crack, and the water actually comes off the bleacher and runs down between them, and then it washes out the dirt. They make it's a bladder, it's a rubber bladder that goes in between of those, and it'll spread itself out, and there's an adhesive that you put in there that'll attach to both sides of the concrete to fill that void, to keep the water from running in between the bleachers. Now, we're gonna have to do that kind of strategically, because that crack was actually put there for water to drain. Now, we don't have this problem at Cherokee, and one of the main reasons is because we're on clay up here and we're on slate down there. It doesn't wash. You know, it's pretty much rock from top to bottom, so it's not really a problem down there.
For an example, down on the track, below the bleachers, from the 40-yard line to the 40-yard line, they've gone in at some point and dug a trench to drain the water, but it
stays full of mud.
It fills up with mud. That's how much is coming out from underneath the bleachers.
So everything off the press box is coming forward instead of going off the back side?
No, this is just what hits on the actual bleacher surface. Yeah. Yeah, it's nothing from a building. It's not drainage from a building. It's actually water that hits the actual bleachers, and then it has nowhere to run.
So the water making the press box sink on that side, where's that water coming from?
Now the water is, the dirt is leaving. When we go out there, I'll show you.
Underneath the...
Because you're on a slope. You know, the stands go right up to the front of the press box.
Right.
Okay? So if you're washing dirt out here, that's what's holding the bottom of this foundation. So that foundation is starting to slide down the hill along with the dirt. We'll look at it when we get out there, but it's not moved a tremendous amount. I mean, it's not something that we can't fix. It's not something that we can't save, but it has moved significantly.
We looked at that a few years ago, and that face is, what is it, a 4-inch gap between the side walls and the front wall on the corners.
It's actually not broke at the corners. That's what's strange. The corners are fine. You're talking about the inside walls.
Yeah.
Yeah, the inside walls, it's pretty good up top. But there we thought the top where the lintel was, and we'll see this when we get out, we thought the actual top was rotating, but that's not what's happening. It's the whole thing is actually sliding down.
Is this something we're going to have to do before school, before the
Or, I mean, is it a danger to people on it right now, is my question?
Not currently.
And how about football season? A few months from now, I mean, is it still gonna be safe to put people on it until we can get this done?
The engineer that looked at it didn't think it was an immediate concern, but it does need to be fixed because it's only gonna get worse.
I just don't want people on there and, you know, none of us do.
Being on the roof.
That's another thing. I hadn't got to that
Oh,
yet.
sorry.
Have you thought about any kind of canopy across the front of the press box that might be able to divert the water?
Well, see, the water's not actually coming from the press box.
It's,
I would suggest we put a canopy over
Right.
just that area.
Right.
Because there is a wall between the bleachers and the press box that used to have a gap between it. When we were here, that's where everybody shoved all their trash. But now they have since covered that up with concrete and filled it in. There again, we'll look at that when we get out there.
Okay.
But so water's not actually, and I assume that's what they had originally thought where the water was coming from, was it was running off the
Yeah.
press box and straight down in.
Right.
But they filled that gap, so that's not where the water's coming from. The water that is affecting this area is actually coming from the bleachers themselves. So
Okay.
there's no real way to cover it or to stop it from running in, and we have to let water run off the bleachers. So it's kind of it's an odd situation, but we'll look at it when we get out there. But I wanted to kind of inform you of what it was before we got out there.
Okay.
Now, something that Chris asked was people being on the roof of the press box. They've built nice stairs and everything up there. That's really a no-no, and we need to stop it. I know I've said it since I've been here that we need to stop that. We need to stop that. And it's been done for years. You're right. It has been, but that doesn't make it any more right today than it did 10 years ago.
What kind of structure? Is it wood? Is it metal decking, or what is it on the roof?
That's pre-capped concrete panels. Yeah, I mean, as far as you being on it, you're not. I mean, you could load that roof up and you're not going to crush it. That's not where the problem lies. The problem lies is with the liability of if somebody trips and falls off of it, or the wrong people drive by at the right time.
I have to agree with Mr. Glass on this. I'm not comfortable having those folks up there because there's a lot of people up there during football games.
Yes.
Who are they?
They're filming. It's coaches. They don't use the press box per se. You got a coach in the press box and a coach on the field with headphones, and they're communicating. You got film crews.
And one of the reasons that they don't use the press box is, and this probably wasn't really in 1978 when they started the construction of these. Probably wasn't that big of a deal because you had to have wired headsets anyway, because wireless wasn't really that big. So if I'm coaching against Chris, we're sitting this close.
Yeah.
If we're both in the press box. So if I'm calling a play, he's hearing it. So none of them wants to sit in there, okay? Because there's no dividers between home, visitors. You're all right there together. So now our home team has been on the roof for years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been like that for several years.
Didn't Cherokee?
Yes.
They built coaches' boxes to the side of.
Which I had talked to Jim Whalen about that as well. That is the plan, to get them off of the roof and to build those coaches' boxes. They have one on each end of the press box, one for home, one for visitors. That way they're separated. They're actually built up the height of that back wall. The floor in them is as high as the back wall there, so nobody can stand in front of you. You're still up high enough where you can see. and, you're separated. So, that is the plan. However, that plan has been kinda set on the side until we get these piers put in. Sorry.
Shannon, is there anything that can be done to the roof that would bring it temporarily up to code for people to be up there?
I didn't want to do that,
I understand.
but, because it's gonna be kind of, it's gonna be money that we're gonna put into it that's gonna have to be ultimately removed.
Sure.
But we do have some chain link post and, fencing that we have pulled from other areas. We can actually take and make some uprights to bolt onto that parapet up there and make a temporary fence around there. As long as we got a fence, they can be up there. They have to have a handrail, 500 pounds push over, and then they can be up there. Still, it's hard on the roof, but that's, right now, that's kind of where we're stuck. So, I guess what I'm saying is we probably need to go ahead and get that fenced off, get the uprights on it, get a fence around it, let them continue to use it until we can get the columns put in and the press box put back, the foundation jack back up.
In your opinion, Wes, could since things are wireless now, can they use the press box inside?
And that, my thing with it is, if you're gonna tell them they can't be on there, we need to do that now, so they can start planning for how they're gonna host their first game. Cause you've got an official in there keeping time, you have someone that's running the scoreboard, you have a PA announcer, their spotter, you have some cup teams bring 2, 3, 4 coaches, excuse me, you've got sometimes 2, sometimes 4 people doing radio, depending on who we're playing, how many different radio stations are being broadcast. It's tight quarters. So if we're gonna tell them our coaches can't be on the roof, then we need to let them know right away so they can start planning and letting people know, hey, we don't have room for you to bring X radio, X, coaches, X this, because it's gonna be pretty tight quarters.
Don't want to limit anything like that.
And there's really, used to be some wooden platforms, and may still be, on either side of the press box. Are those both gone now?
Those are gone, yeah.
It's not real conducive to coaching out
No.
there in the bleachers anyway.
There's a lot of coaching goes on.
You can hear it, yeah,
I'm
and
not
they're
sure,
brilliant.
I'm not sure where to put them.
I don't, like I said, we can put uprights and actually fence that in up there temporarily. It won't be a permanent, it won't be a permanent structure. But we can do that temporarily until we can get the foundation stabilized, repairs
And then
made,
add the wings.
and then add the wings after. Because if we add them on now, we're gonna have to tear them down to get the columns in.
But your crew can put in the temporary safeguards.
Yes, yeah, I don't see a problem.
You've got the material to do that, right?
Yeah, that's what I said. We've got some that we've taken down from different places. We'll use what we have.
And whatever's decided, if you allow them to go up there, then we can work with the school to limit it to essential people only. We don't need, people up there just because, so.
Well, as I said,
That's not an issue either way, yeah.
right now, it's not a bad enough structural issue that something's gonna
Right.
catastrophically happen to it tomorrow. But it does need to be stabilized, it does need to be repaired before it becomes that catastrophic problem.
And then the fix for the mud washing out underneath is put those rubber gaskets in.
That'll stop it. And as I said, the grade beams seem to have not moved at all.
So the bleachers are stable.
The bleachers are stable. It's actually in between the two.
It's
When we
washing-
get out there, we'll
it's
look at
washing
it.
out between
It's
them.
washing out between the two,
Right.
which the
We
press
all-
box is directly in between the grade beams.
Right,
So
right.
when we get out there, we'll look at it and I'll kind of explain to you. And you can actually see, if we walk down to the track, you can actually see where the mud comes from.
Sure. Is this project gonna be dissected into two separate, or is this something we can go ahead and do the bladder adhesive, or?
We can do it as one project if that's your all's wishes. That's totally up to you. Or we can actually do it in two projects and have the bladders, because most of these sealant companies are very, they have their own installers. So if I'm a general contractor that's gonna be putting in the piers and repairing the stadium, the press box, I'm gonna have to subcontract the bladders. So we could actually do that in two and not have the markup on the subcontractor putting the bladders in with the contractor that's actually putting in the.
So would the piers and press box be a priority then come back after that?
I would stabilize the press box first. Because once you stabilize the press box, the mud washing out is not that big a deal
Because you're going to bedrock.
because you're going to bedrock anyway with the augers. So you've basically put piers all the way down. So even if everything washes out from under the footer, your footer's stabilized.
I remember when we did it down here in the 200s, jacked up the whole corner of that wing.
Oh yeah, it
Press box
it
is-
had sunk quite a bit right over here. I forget how much I actually bid on that project as a contractor. I forget how much they had to raise that. It was
It was a lot, yeah.
it was significant, like 16 inches or something crazy. And they lifted the whole 200s wing, that whole corner.
Back corner and the front corner. I mean.
So you're expecting about $100,000 for the press box project?
That's my guess. It's about 100,000 on the press box, and I'm gonna say probably 35.
We give the contractor the bid to go ahead and make the corrections inside the press box once we're jacked up?
Oh, yes, we'll do that as one, because we're gonna have to reattach those corners, because there's some walls, you have the front wall of the press box, and then you have some walls that are attached, perpendicular to it, and where the front wall has actually started to lean, you have a pretty significant crack up through there. So once we jack that up, it should close it back up. But I'd still like to put some angle iron in that corner to, if nothing else, to hide the crack.
Right.
Once the foundation stabilizes, structurally it's not a problem, but because it's basically a divider wall.
What's your timeline on this? ASAP, or?
It needs to be done. In my opinion, it needs to be done pretty quickly.
Can we do it with football season coming up, or wait till after the season?
We need to get it out there now. It probably won't be done until after football season's over, because by the time you get the bid put out, which has to go through the county mayor's office, by the time you get the bid put out, the bid's back in, you all have to approve it at a board meeting. So that's that is a month. Before you can approve it. So by the time we get that back in, then you contact the contractor, you get all the paperwork done, then he orders the piers, because this is not something that you just have laying around. By the time he gets everything in, football season will well be over. I'm gonna say probably earliest we would have it is maybe January-ish. And they seem to think, and this is the plan now, because those come in sections. You basically have, if you've ever seen a drill rig, like a oil rig, you drill in so far and you add a piece, and you drill in so far and you add a piece. The front wall toward the bleachers has a solid concrete wall in the way. So the plan is to jack that side of the building up from inside. So we'll actually cut holes in the floor and run the augers on the inside and jack it up from the backside.
Is that concrete walls? That thick?
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I think it's about a 16-inch wall.
3 feet high?
Yeah.
I wanna see that.
Yeah.
Them to jack it from
Yeah, I
inside,
wanna come
it's
watch that.
pretty impressive.
Okay, our recommendation then would be to authorize bidding of the press box and then the repair, the bladder, repair on the grandstands, and then also approve Shannon to temporarily put up a retaining fence or something temporarily on top. And Wes will go back to volunteer and Cherokee, make sure there's no unauthorized people up there.
Yeah, I only go for Cherokee.
Is that our recommendation?
Yeah.
Everybody good? Okay, that'll be the recommendation we'll take on August the 9th.
Okay, I have a question. I
Okay.
think in October, if I understood what you all decided in that meeting as a board, is that we could go ahead and do bids without getting your permission to do a bid.
We
Then
did.
that actually comes before the board to accept a bid or not accept a bid. That, so,
We did do that. I don't think it was well received by everybody, but we did do that. But it does expedite the whole process, otherwise it gets
It gets really long.
laid out.
And, you know, with a bid, you're not spending money.
No.
I mean, we still have to come to you to get the funds approved. But my question was, just for this meeting, was how do you wanna approach this? And do we wanna start that now?
Speak to it. I'm good with it.
No problem.
I think it needs to be expedited as
Sooner better
quickly as
than
we
later.
can, yeah. Because a lot of these contractors get filled up quick.
I think the concern about just letting bids out without board approval is board members not being informed that bids are being let out. I think that's the biggest concern. As long as notification's sent out to all of us,
Easy remedy.
yeah.
Shannon, this is not something that you're just doing on your own. You've had some professional people look at this and give some recommendations, didn't you?
Oh, yes, if you remember correctly, when we did the Kepler, we had 3 projects on that same structural engineer. We had Kepler, Volunteers Press Box, and Pathways, which we'll talk about next. All 3 of those are through the same structural engineer, which is Steve Wilson.
And this is consistent with his recommendations on the
He-
piers and the jacking and all that.
He will specify exactly how many piers, all that. That's the spec that will go out to be bid on.
Or do we
Not
need
mine.
Do we need an architect since this is over 25,000?
You don't have to, you either have to have an architect or an engineer. We have an engineer. So as long as as long as it's stamped with his,
Structural.
yeah, he's a structural engineer. As long as he stamped it, we're good.
Does he have to approve it at the completion?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, he'll be over the project.
okay,
Yes.
all right.
As long as we proceed with the project, he'll be over it.
Does maintenance have to wait till the August meeting to put up temporary fencing?
No,
No.
we're not
May have
expending any real funds.
Okay, we'll go ahead and I'll have that conversation with the administration here then.
So,
It shouldn't affect them at all, really. I mean,
Who's up there? Yeah.
we just need to limit the amount of people that's up there.
make sure the record's clear, Rita, did that answer your question, that we would go ahead and put out bids to the mayor's office, but we won't do anything until they come back?
Which I do not have, I was hoping to have the design back before we had this meeting. Is exactly how many piers he was recommending. I do not have that.
So you wait on Steve to get back.
Because I didn't know we were gonna have this quite this quick, but I will have that.
Okay.
So, and I'll send his recommendations out to each one of you as soon as I have it in hand.
Good, good.
And then we'll bid it according to his recommendations.
so I'll wait till you get his recommendations, and then we can notify the board that if using these recommendations, we'll go out
Right.
to bid with.
And you'll bid out the bladder and the adhesive and all that separate.
Yes, we'll make it 2 projects.
Okay.
Um,
Could they do that before, or would you wanna do that? I mean, stop all this erosion to get that in, or?
I don't think you wanna put the bladders in first because we're likely to cause some movement.
Yeah. Okay.
When we start raising that, the foundation for the press box, those sections of bleachers are basically, they're huge concrete sections that are basically just sitting on a grade.
Yeah.
I mean, they will move. We could pick them up right now and take every one of them off. When we start raising that up, I'm afraid we might get some movement. And if we spend $30,000 to put these bladders in, and then we damage them, it's on us. That's not gonna be a warranty issue. So I think we need to stabilize everything first, and then we'll go back with the repairs. Now, any questions on that one? Pathways, alternative school. We have much the same problem. And the repair is gonna be much the same, but quite a bit cheaper. Let's see, it would be the back corner closest to Rogersville Middle School, where all the pine trees were. We had a problem with drainage there, which is what we think caused the majority of the settlement on the back corner of that building. We had 9 huge pine trees. I don't know if you remember those that were between Pathways Alternative School and Rogersville Middle School. On a bank there were 9 huge pine trees. The main drain for that area, storm drain, was directly under those pine trees. Well, it took us a while to find it because the pine needles were quite deep over top of it. So water sat there, saturated the ground, foundation started to settle on that back corner. We're gonna have to do much the same thing. Drill in some augers and raise that back corner up. Gonna be minimal compared to this one. We're thinking 6 to 8 piers on that back corner. So, and we actually did put that in, let's see, let me find that. We put that in the 5-year plan for this year, which we also put in volunteer in the 5-year plan, the press box. But the press box has changed because now I have an actual recommendation. We had press box repair in the 5-year plan at $30,000 and Pathways repair at $30,000. The $30,000 for Pathways I think will be pretty close. I don't think it's going to go much out of that. The one for volunteer is not. We need to put a 1 in front of that 30 and we'll probably do colors. But that was already, we had already planned on that at the retreat we had.
Do you save any money by joining these 2 projects and letting a contractor bid both of them?
I don't think you will because these piers are actually, they don't care if they do 1 or they do 100. They're going to charge you the same amount for them regardless because there's only like 3 companies that take them. They know what it costs them to put them in and that's what they're going to charge you. So there again, it's kind of like one of these proprietary alarms. They know what they can charge you and that's what they're going to charge you. So
You want to speak to the safety and the structural issue? Is there anything for us to?
This has been an ongoing problem at Pathways as well as here. Movement is very slight. I think it may have moved a quarter of an inch in the last 4 years.
So there's no problem.
I mean, it's not, and the pine trees are removed now, all those are gone. They're cut down, they're out of there. So, we'll actually, did I steal your pen? No, I didn't steal your pen. I was gonna say, it wasn't me, I thought I had that one in my pocket, I've got a red one.
Yeah, but
So it's not really, it's not something that, is gonna cause immediate concern, but if we don't stop it, it will.
It's not a safety issue.
It's not a safety issue right now.
You wanna do the same thing on it as well,
Yeah,
in terms of
there
bidding?
again, I'm waiting on Steve's actual paperwork before we actually put this out, but
By a nod of the head, is that a recommendation everybody's comfortable with? Okay. Unanimous?
because there again, no funds will be spent until I bring it before the board to accept the bids anyway. Next thing on our list is paving. Oh, does anybody got any question on pathways? It's basically the same thing as volunteer. Paving, we've talked about this for some time. At Churchill Elementary, here at Volunteer, Cherokee and Hawkins. I have an updated price. It's in your packet from W&L, which has the current county bid for paving. Which apparently I have put somewhere. I got it right here. I think I have these in some kind of order. Churchill Elementary should be your first, am I right?
Yes.
Okay, if we go with the county's bid, and this is just an overlay, is $86,560.
What's the removal mean? Says asphalt removal?
Bad areas.
Oh.
If we have any areas that mud's pumping through, they'll actually cut those out, put gravel back in, and then overlay.
How much overlay? Inch?
Yeah, it's just gonna be a surfacing. Then we have, and it should tell you, well, may not.
it says on this quote does not include curb or removal / installation of bumper blocks, base asphalt patching or sign. My question is the base asphalt patching, wouldn't that be considered, if they cut out a bad spot, isn't that base asphalt patching?
They're talking, you have a base and a cap.
Right, I understand.
They'll patch the area, but they're not gonna go in and put base all over it. They're gonna patch it, they're gonna go back over it with what they're paving with.
Okay, just the cap.
Now, yes, which this is highway spec, which we had some issues with this before. The aggregate in the highway spec, DOT spec, is very large aggregate. It's not like your driveway, which is why we had some questions asked about the paving at Mount Carmel and Volunteer about the size of the rock that was in the paving, because it's not pretty and fine little rock. Okay, it doesn't look like your driveway, it looks like the highway. It's very large stone. If we go with the county bid and work off the county bid, that's what you're gonna get, just to make people aware. It's not gonna be pretty and fine like your driveway.
Does that open that up? Does that make that asphalt any less?
It is more porous,
It
if
is?
that's what you're asking, yes. It is more porous.
Does it require more resurfacing than the other?
It really needs to be coated quickly. my suggestion would be, let's bid this with a driveway mix and not go off the county bid. I think we'll get a better price for resurfacing.
This is a little higher than we initially thought, isn't it?
No, this is actually what we did the estimates off of. I think we have 863,000 estimated. I don't know what this one totals us up for me.
Right there.
Oh, yeah, it is. You're right.
1,051,000.
So yes, it is
I thought this was a little higher.
a little higher.
And when was this quote, 5?
Yep,
Quote date
5 and
was
2. It's done May the 2nd.
Shannon, what are large retail parking lots done with? Are they done with?
They're not done with the highway mix, no. Most of them are done with more of a driveway mix, small aggregate.
So plenty durable enough for a school parking lot?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know, as bad a shape as Churchill is and Hawkins Elementary.
Churchill and Hawkins Elementary.
If they go in and cut out the bad spots, put in the chat, pack it down and put 1 inch on it, that will make.
Well, now,
no
they'll build those areas back
They'll
up
build
to
it
the
back
height.
up.
Because you can't just put an inch in them, because then it's gonna be a
Yeah.
big swell. No, they'll build those areas back up before they ever pave over top of all of it.
Okay, gotcha.
It's an inch and a half, quarter inch.
Yes.
Well, you know, when it says 1.5 inches, I've always wondered, is that compacted 1.5 inches?
That is a compacted 1.5 inches.
My thoughts are is that after seeing some of the other work that we open it up for a full bid to everybody.
I think you'll be much happier with a driveway mix versus a highway mix.
I'm talking about contractors, not just limited to this.
Yeah.
One company to open it up to pave well and some of the others that,
Well, you'll get a lot of people bidding on the parking lots that won't bid for the county's highway mix. Because a lot of them only make one mix. At their plants, they'll go to a batch plant, and this is what we're gonna make because we do driveways. And that's all they're gonna make.
okay.
So yes, you'll get a lot better response if we open it up, I think.
And it gives us something to compare this to as well.
Right. I think, I mean, we've proven that through a lot of the bids, which I actually have a,
No harm, no foul in doing a bid if it doesn't come back.
on the larger projects, when we've actually got bids in, we've saved tremendously on the amount of money. Well, for instance, we had very, very high interest in the roofing projects at Bulls Gap and Churchill. We had probably, I think we had 10 contractors come to those pre-bids. When the bids come back in, I think we had 155,000 estimated at Churchill, and it come back at 140 total. We had 280 at Bulls Gap, and we ended up actually spending 161,000. So big differences when you get people to show up.
Yeah.
And if we can get that interest out there and get several qualified contractors to come in and give us a bid, I think we'll get a much better price.
Now, in terms of how we're going to pay for this, I think our board needs to be cognizant that we're talking about taking this from fund balance. We don't have $1,051,000 in capital projects to do this. So, that's.
But we've already approved.
Did we not put this was actually put in for
That's it.
this
Yeah.
fiscal year?
Did we put $1 million in it though?
Supposed to have put in, No, we never did move the money.
Because we didn't know.
Yep, we never did move the money.
But it was approved to do the
The
project,
project was approved, we just haven't put the money, designated the money yet.
because we haven't gotten the bids.
Right.
And when did we approve this?
So it's back, before February, when we had our, workshop up at the.
Retreat, yeah.
No, I think it was prior to December. Because I
This
think
is
me and
a-
Steve were talking about, you know, can we go ahead and get some paving done? And he said, no, they usually shut down around December. So this has been going on quite a while.
It's been going on a while.
I think we just never attached a fiscal note to it. We've approved it, I think twice actually, through
But no
our
bids have ever been
capital
let out.
projects, yeah.
And that's kind of where my question is why are we just now getting around to bidding these?
I think we've got, just to be honest with you, we got sidetracked with Kepler and, you know, trying to decide how to go about remedying that issue, because that was a big fiscal note too. If we were going to try to repair it, we needed close to $1 million to repair it, or whether we was going to shutter the school, and so that is still out there.
And yeah, I mean, that's still a discussion.
So, I think we're, at this particular meeting, we're trying to go back and prioritize our hit list on our capital improvements.
I think it's already been prioritized, it's approved. Is it not?
Unless we're gonna bump it up, and it's been approved, yes, but, we just need to be aware of the price tag, and the longer we wait, the more we're gonna pay.
Well, let me ask this. Since we have made repairs, the parking lots here at Cherokee, well, the football parking lot at Cherokee is horrible, but the parking lot at Cherokee and here, with the help of the highway department, most of the bad spots have been cut out and patched back. They're not near as bad as they were. Do they still need paving? Yes, but at least we don't have holes that you can lose a small car in. Churchill Elementary and Hawkins are horrible. So, do we want to maybe go ahead and do them on the county bid, those two schools, and then bid the two high schools?
I think we've waited this long, and what you're saying is you'd get a better service and probably a better price if let's bid those two. Hawkins Elementary and Churchill.
That's roughly 182, is that right?
It is, about 183,000.
That's an easier pill to swallow right now. Then see where we're at mid-year on the two high schools.
I think, like I say, the two high schools, I don't know if you drove around the parking lots here at the high schools, are much better than they were. It's still just patches. I mean, at some point it's gonna get worse. So it does need to be resurfaced, but they're much better than they were at the first of last year.
We dodged a bullet at Churchill Elementary last year, when that lady fell carrying a little baby. I just really feel like, well, you know what happened. So we need to move
Can we
forward.
just put this out for bid and ask them to do a bid for each school separately, and then allow the board to select which they feel we have money for at that time?
I personally,
Or you think you
As-
get a better
as-
price as one project?
as a contractor, or a former contractor, I'm not a contractor anymore, but as a former contractor, it is very upsetting to bid a project and then hear, oh, we don't have the funds, so that's, to me, that's just price shopping, you know, you're just putting it out there. And at some point, this has happened to several companies in Kingsport area. You won't get anybody to bid. So, which is why we put estimates on everything and say, here's how much money we think we're gonna need. And if it goes 10% either way, we're good, you know. Luckily, in the past 2 years, we have been able to save a little off of what we estimated. I think last year was I'm right at $50,000 less than what we estimated, and so far, with the projects that we've done, this past fiscal year was around 155,000 difference between what we estimated and what we actually ended up expending. So we're doing good on that part as far as getting people in to bid and getting good prices. I won't mess that up.
Would we be better off and save money to do it as one large bid or separate it into two elementaries and the two high schools like Chris was suggesting? How much?
With-
cost
I had
that?
that same question.
With the way that we're doing, asphalt price is gonna be asphalt price. I mean, it's gonna cost what it's gonna cost. If it was like the whole campus here at Volunteer and we were doing parking lot C, then parking lot B, then parking lot A, I would say, yes, it'll save you money if you group it. But when you're talking about, the things that you're gonna save on, which is mobilization, combining different campuses, it's not gonna save you on mobilization because you're still gonna have to move. It will save you on performance payment bonds. It will save you on, well, really, performance and payments bonds, is really about it. So, I mean, you're talking 1% of the project total, 1.5% at most, for a performance and payment bond is what's gonna cost. So, if you've got $100,000 project, it's gonna save you $1,000 to combine them. I think you'll be better off and better served if we bid them separate. I really do. And if we bid them separate, we may have, Fuller paving down at Hawkins, may have, Sullivan paving over here, Pavewell paving here. You can get them done at the same time, rather than it's gonna take 6 months to get them completed, when we can do it in 2 months if everybody's working at the same time.
Now, the last possible date to pave is December 1, or I know it
They'll
depends on
pave
weather.
until it gets cold.
Got it. All
I
right.
mean, I can't answer that question. I've seen asphalt plants open year round,
Sure. So,
but I've also seen them close at the end of September. I mean, it's,
yeah. We're mid-July, bids go out. Again, we're talking mid to late fall before
yeah,
we get it approved and started, depending on their schedules.
depending on their schedules. The good thing is usually toward summertime's a bad time to pave because everybody's trying to pave at the same time.
Yeah.
It's much like anything else. It's much like bleachers. It's much like, well, anything that we do, roofing, any project, because that's our break time. Well, that's everybody else's break time too, and they're wanting the same project done at the same time. So a lot of these companies get way overloaded, and unfortunately, there's a lot less companies now than there were 15 years ago. We're limited on the amount of people that we can actually bring in.
Is the recommendation of the committee to split this up in two bids, do the two elementaries as one bid and the two high schools as one bid, or high schools individually?
My suggestion would be do the high schools individually.
Okay.
I don't mind the elementary schools because they are a lot smaller project to do those on the same bid, but I would, my personal opinion would be to separate the two high schools.
Just like the roofing, splitting the two bids up on the roof saved us.
It saved us a little
saved us
money. Yeah,
87,000.
it saved us a little money to split those up, so.
So everybody understand the recommendation? Two elementaries together and separate high school bids, and we would put this on the to-do list, hopefully this fiscal year,
Yes.
okay?
I would certainly hope so.
Okay.
It was actually it was actually discussed to do it on last fiscal year, but we were bringing it out of fund balance. And there again, it kinda got,
Yes.
we didn't,
Derailed.
well, yeah.
Okay, is everybody good? All right. You, number 5?
Okay, if many of you have come into the front office at Volunteer in Cherokee, you notice the countertop sitting there is wide open. At Cherokee, at night, they secure that with a motorized gate that moves very slowly across to secure the area. The one here at Volunteer has been worked on at least twice a year, every year that I've been here, and it's still broke. It'll work for about a week and then it breaks. It's horrible. I had talked to Holston Glass, which has a proposal in there, about installing a aluminum storefront over that counter. Leave the counter right where it's at. Put our base for our aluminum storefront with some sliding windows, 3 of them, where you can have 3 stations, slide the window open, slide out a clipboard, you know. That gives some separation between, because what normally runs the front counter is our office workers, students. So that gives some separation between whoever comes in and the students. And then on the open area out toward where you walk around the counter would be a storefront door, a glass door, much like back here.
What would that do for the air conditioning?
That would help, well, that would
Really wouldn't
block
do any.
off that area.
The hallway area there in front of the office is not, no, there are a few supply vents out
Right
there.
above Sabrina's office, or desk.
No, but in the lobby area.
Yeah, there's 2 ceiling registers right there.
It shouldn't be.
But where are they fed from? The hallway ones? Are they in the office as well? It could possibly maybe help a little, but until we get the ductwork fixed, nothing's gonna really help, which is number 6. We'll get there in just a second.
And one thing that Eddie and I have been talking about, and we haven't gotten this completed, the safety.
The secure assessment, those grants, there's some potential grant money coming down from the federal government to each of the states after the shooting in Florida this year. And potentially, I think Tennessee is gonna receive 34 or 35 million.
Yeah,
And that's gonna trickle down to each school district as a one-time grant of money. And then we'll also get a reoccurring grant year to year. And I think it's all gonna be dealing with safety features in the school. And I think this could be considered a safety feature. And it might be something, depending on the amount of money we get, we might look at, I know I brought this up at the retreat, bulletproof glass. I know it's expensive, but I'm not sure what that initial one-time assessment or, grant
Right.
money that we're gonna be receiving will be, but I think it may be substantial.
And you don't know what timeline those
Yes, we do, we've gotta have it.
We've gotta have these
School.
assessments done before school begins, of all 19 of our campuses.
and it has to be done with principal,
Train,
Has to be done with for sure with an
law enforcement,
SRO and an administrator who has been to the training. Those 2 people. The principal, I think, is not a requirement. It's the SRO.
I thought it was.
I don't think so. I think it's just the SRO that attended the training and an administrator that attended the training.
I think that's where the thing, that we
we
ended
only
up
did,
just putting the principals in as well, because,
I don't think it,
no, I think we did.
yeah, oh, okay.
Because Erica is gonna be our designated trained person.
Has she been to the training?
Yes.
She has, yes.
Yes.
next
I will be there as well.
20.
Is,
Is that when she's doing that?
We can't do this in one day.
no,
No.
this is,
Comprehensive.
I'm
But-
confused.
anyway,
I think they're,
but we're including the principals as well. The principal, Renee, is gonna do all of them with us. Erica, and then myself, we're going to each school.
Are you suggesting hold off on this? Till we
Unless it's a must before school starts, I
Well-
would suggest we see what kind of money we're gonna be getting.
This is not, like I say, this is just a suggestion that I'm putting out there. Because those rolling gates are horrible. They take forever to close.
Yeah.
There's no way to secure the office right now as far as at night. That's where we have places to go if there is an intruder that comes in. The actual office area locks, between the guidance office and the front office. That area locks. You also have the copy room, mail room, whatever you want to call it, which also locks. That's not where,
Even if the gate were working properly, that's not the secure area anyway.
no, that's not the secure area at all. What we're trying to do is one, if you've ever been in there when classes change, the noise is horrid. I mean, you can't hear. When people call anything, you can't hear. So the reason I did this was, one, to cut down on the noise, and two, to be able to secure that front office
Yeah.
so that they didn't have to pick up every single object at the end of the day and take it back into the copy room or back into the other office.
Is this something that we might wanna do, to consider doing at Cherokee also? Cause they have the same
Yes,
issues
that's-
that's here. And if.
Right now, they can secure their office at night though. That's where we're having a problem here, is I can't keep this gate working long enough to make it where you can secure that front office at night. Right now, you can walk up there and you can walk right in the front part, where Sabrina and
That's the only.
that's the only one out front.
But, you know, if we went ahead and spent the $8,000 and then got the grant money, we could take that $8,000 back. But if we're getting a substantial amount of money and went ahead waited and did bulletproof glass, would be better served.
Well,
Do we know?
but
when
here's a
we'll
problem.
know?
Once we turn that in, those assessments in, I'm not sure what the timeline is. I know it's pretty quick because I know of one system that has already gotten their estimate of what they're getting on both the one-time grant and the recurring grant. So, must be a pretty quick turnaround. We just gotta get our end
Right.
done.
The problem I foresee with even bulletproof glass up front, you can put bulletproof glass up front, but then you still have side windows
Yeah, and the guidance office.
and the guidance office.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's gonna help us as much as just, typically if you can slow somebody down, that's what I'm looking for. You know, we're not trying to me, we don't really need to create a bubble. We need a way to separate angry individuals definitely from students that are out front.
Is there an issue about supplanting? If we go ahead and approve this financially, would we get into the whole issue that we're supplanting county funds with federal dollars? Because that's generally a no-no.
I probably would recommend waiting and get the assessment done, because we have to get it done quickly
Mhm.
and get that in. And, principals are back day after tomorrow. And I expect that Shannon and Erica already have these set up to maybe, I don't know,
do every school though, right?
Yes, we wanna do every.
Even though the principal's not trained, he still could have a lot of input on what he'd like to see.
That was the whole plan with
Yeah.
putting
And then get
Erica and
whoever's trained,
Renee as the two designated
sign off on it.
But I think-
trained personnel, and then myself and
Sure.
the principal walk around just, because we know more how the buildings function than they do.
So do you have to have an estimate on the price tag on these particular improvements? We wouldn't have that quickly.
No, from what I understand, this is and I can't really speak to it because I've not dealt with it. This is coordinated school health. Erica's dealt with it much more than I have, because that's the way it came down. So from what I understand, it is basically a grant that says, here's what we're gonna give you to spend on safety. You need to have trained personnel to know how to designate the funds. That's the way I understood it. Now, I'm not sure that we have to send in estimates on every single thing that we're gonna spend it on. I don't think we do. I think it's, here's how much money you're gonna get, thanks for doing the assessment, we know you need funds, here you go.
I think they look at the magnitude of the needs, it seems to me,
Okay.
like on the different amounts of money that's coming.
Seems like I heard early on that they were based it on attendance, enrollment. Is that not the case now? Because I know like Memphis and Nashville and Chattanooga, they're gonna get much more than we are, of course, they have larger school systems. So, I mean, that's what I
I'm
heard,
sure-
had heard early
I'm sure
on.
it'll somewhat have to be done on attendance, because,
Yeah,
I
no,
mean, you
it's
have
not
more
in that
needs when you have
situation.
bigger buildings and more buildings.
Right.
But anyway, that was just, and this started, I started this quite some time ago, trying to get something started where we could separate these two areas and lock this up. I just wanted you all to be aware of it, that I'm more than likely gonna bring this to you
Okay.
to approve.
Well, this certainly segues into what Reba's talking about there, and I can't imagine anybody being opposed to us getting as much help as we can get, and let's go full speed ahead and try to get these done.
We'll get those done and
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, we might be able to do a lot more than just two high schools, we might be
Yeah.
able to close up some other.
Which we do still have the secured entrance
Yeah.
that's still floating out
Yeah.
there. Now, some of those schools are very inexpensive. Mount Carmel, Churchill Intermediate, and we may not even do it the way that it's drawn on. We may not have to do it exactly the way, but there's some of them that are rather reasonable price tags
Sure.
to fix. Now, there's some of them that are nightmares, and we know that. Rogersville Middle,
Yeah.
Warrensville Middle is gonna take some work
Okay.
to put it in, but
I think
Anyway.
we need to get on all of our safety issues ASAP. I mean, every time something bad happens, we're all gung ho to do it, but we haven't done much. So I think we need to do that, and I think everybody else agrees, that we need to get moving with something.
Okay.
and the last is something you were talking about, was HVAC ductwork, which we've talked about this several times before. I just want you to be aware that it is not getting better, it's getting worse.
It's not fixing itself.
It's not fixing itself. And one of the reasons I put that on here is so that we're here now and you can better understand the troubles that we have in repairing the ductwork or getting these to operate the way they're supposed to. If you look, when we go out, if you look in the hallway here, all the hallways are done in this board. It is screwed to the ceiling, fastened to the bar joist. That's where the ductwork's at. We can't get to it without taking each individual board down in the area we need to work on. So, a lot of this is very problematic to repair. He can speak more to it than I can. I mean, You have duct board, which is basically compressed insulation that's duct taped together, for lack of better terms. And the adhesive on the tape has since lived its life in its 36 years of existence, and it's starting to blow apart. I know there's areas that the office gets hot. If you climb above the ceiling, it's cool.
Cause all the ours
Yeah.
still in the ceiling?
Yeah, because the duct works out. This is not gonna be a cheap project, and it's not gonna fix itself. It's gonna be costly, because ultimately, every ceiling that you see will have to be removed or repaired.
Wow.
Now, the suspended ceiling, not that big a deal to remove. You can get it out pretty quick, and you can put it back up pretty cheap. The hallway ceilings are gonna be a pain, because, as you see in those, just one board has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 12 nails in that one board. And that only covers 6 inches. So, all those have to be pulled, every single one of them. And that's the way the entire hallways are done.
You probably can't salvage the boards either, can you?
Actually, it leaves a pretty good hole in them. We screw them back up.
Yeah, those are nailed.
Those are nailed in place. The original ones are nailed in place. When we pull them, we back the nails up, and then we put screws back in them. Can you see the screws better than, yeah, you can see them, but we can also remove them next time when we need to remove them. So,
Would there be a different way of reducting?
oh yeah, it needs to be metal ductwork.
I mean, instead of going into the ceiling, can you put, you go into restaurants and it's got exposed ductwork, you go into certain buildings?
Well, yes and no.
Well, I'm not saying throughout the whole school, but can you do it in some places, cause we've got high ceilings?
Yes, we do. You're gonna run into, when you do that, you're gonna have to come past your fire damper. Cause you have fire rated corridors, which is where most of your ductwork is at in here. And then it feeds through the wall and into here, or
I'm not saying to do it that way, I'm just asking.
you can. I mean, there's a lot of the high schools that are being built now that they'll just put suspended ceiling in the middle and leave it open on both sides. They just hide the piping and stuff with a small piece of. I mean, you can do anything,
Yeah.
but
You have to drop the sprinkler heads, wouldn't you,
yes,
below the,
Oh man, they cost $4.
you're right. Every single sprinkler head.
So there's no easy answer.
No, that's what I'm saying. No matter what we do, it's not gonna be cheap. But this was a problem that was created by years ago when they got the first original estimates on these 2 high schools. They said they were too high, and they rebid it. And inflation in the 70s was, 16% or something. So when they bid it again, 2.5 years later, it was the same price for the 2 high schools with a lot less amenities. I mean, originally we were supposed to have tennis courts in the original bid. We since have added the tennis courts, but tennis courts, swimming pools. I mean, there was a lot on these 2 high schools that were removed. One of the things that was removed was metal ductwork to ductboard, because ductboard was so much cheaper.
It would be kinda hard to actually put a price on this until, you don't know till you get into it.
No, I mean, you won't know a definite price, but I can tell you it'll be between 600 and 800
Per school.
and that's ductwork. Now, we still have to replace the units.
I make a motion, we go ahead and adjourn right now.
Done and done.
I'm just making, making you aware of what we actually have going on, because I don't want it to slip by and you hear somebody say,
Where's that on our list? It's on there, isn't it, on the ductwork?
actually, no, we put it added on to, phase 4, I think.
That's what we need to do.
But we really need to do phase 4, because we also have another problem at Hawkins Elementary of, at some point, that old boiler's, it's there. It's not really the boiler so much as it is the piping, but we really need to get into phase 4. And I think, if I remember correctly, we have a bond that clears 19, like, into, so if we can get there.
Yeah.
But I honestly think we need to start trying to preserve some, if we're gonna keep the schools operating, we have to preserve what we have.
Let me ask you this, do we need to start anticipating these big ticket items in our budgets and designate funds for these projects? We know we can't sustain where we're at with losing the 12 cents, and we've lost 9.8, I think is what Melissa said, of the 12 cents we got. And you see what we took from the fund balance this year, and we can't sustain that, so we're gonna have to go back to the county commission. We're gonna have to ask them to reinstate the 12 cents so we can start dedicating money to these big projects like we've discussed here today. And this is not all of them, this is just the ones that's rising to the top. And we've also
This is very small portion, but these are some projects that I feel are vitally important.
Right.
To save money down the road. If we don't catch them now,
right,
they're not gonna get cheaper, they're gonna get more expensive, and if you don't fix this part, you're gonna cause damage to something else down the road.
right. I agree. So that would be our overall game plan, is to start designating money for specific large ticket items such as this project and the boiler system. Before we move outside and look at that, Chris had said something to me, I don't know if he's serious about it, a few months back, but it really struck a note with me, and run it by Reba, I think, and some others. But on the Kepler-McFeeters Bend issue, he said, why not move halfway between the two schools? And this is certainly not a plan. So help us on this, Jeff, that this is not a plan. We're talking. Find property between those two schools and build a new structure.
Oh, that was Techie, not that.
No, that's you. You said it to me.
I said use McFeeters Bend.
That was last time. But the first time you said, the first time you approached me, you said, let's just build a new school. And then last month or last week you suggested that. But somewhere in the middle is to build one school and let McFeeters Bend and Kepler, and it would be about, what, 250 to 300 students? 250 maybe is a closer number. BEP would fund it at a full rate because of the size of the school. We would take a school that's in pretty poor condition and needs a lot of work, at another school that's not the greatest, but it's got some age on it, and it's with the closing of the two schools and building one, is it feasible? I just want to hear your all's feedback on it. And it's an issue that requires a bond. We can't get a bond at this stage, but your all's thoughts.
Do you want my honest thought?
Yes.
I've thought of that myself. I think that's, I mean, if we're gonna, I don't think we need to, it's hard to dump money into an old building when you've still got an old building. Even if you repair a building, you still have water lines, sewer lines,
All infrastructure.
Issue.
everything that you can't see. A lot of things, people only worry about the things that they can see. We have a lot of things that we can't see. even on buildings, such as, well, take Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel, everybody thinks is a new, that's a new school. It's the oldest operating school that we have right now. The original Liberty Hill School. It was constructed in 1946, 1947 was when it was built.
Still had clay tile in some places,
It's,
didn't it?
the main sewer line coming out of the old building was terracotta, yes, it was, which actually collapsed on us here last year. So, but we have problems in that building now that are isolated to the old part of the building, which I haven't even brought up. We have, every year, Mount Carmel gets termites. It's not a surprise. We know it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen every spring. As soon as it starts raining, we're getting termites at Mount Carmel. The construction of the building is multi-white brick, just like it is at Kepler, okay? The problem with that is, on the inside of that wall is wood furring strips and stucco. Those termites love that old wood furring. They'll go right up the wall. Now you can't see it. There's no visible damage, but you can go in and the stucco is loose in several places where the termites have ate the furring strips from behind the stucco. It's isolated to the old Liberty Hill section, which is where the office, I don't know if all of y'all know, but where the office, gymnasium, 4th grade, and the conference room, that H, that's where you come in the front door. That is the original Liberty Hill School. It was built in 1946, 47.
Let's talk about the prospect of doing the other. Is it feasible? Is it something we need to start brainstorming about before we sink? Shannon's come back a time or two with me and said this project at Kepler could rise to $1 million easily.
Oh,
And that's about a quarter of what it would cost to build a new school. And we would still have a 70-year-old school building and still have McFeeters Bend with a metal gymnasium, a metal structure that's inferior.
I think when you go back to what the engineer said at the meeting, and this, I guess this is what, I keep thinking about when we're looking at all of our buildings across the county. He said, the standard is that when buildings are designed, they're designed to last for about 50 years. And, of course, Kepler is over its 50 years. It's,
And McFeeters Bend.
and McFeeters Bend is, well, I'd say it's over its 50 years
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
because, I remember when Rock Hill was open, we'd go to McFeeters Bend and play ball, so it's over its 50 years. Basically what this comes back to is, to me, is our county commission willing to help us fund what we need to do, to keep our buildings updated?
Right.
We've been cut, Steve asked for the 12 cents, and, we've been cut 9.8 cents, and that's not including the 5 cents on the educational debt service, which the mayor's office, manages that part, but I think some people think that 5 cents may be included there, and it isn't. So it's taken, over $1 million from our operating budget. And I think it would be feasible if the county commission could work with us and we could get all of our buildings. I mean, we're sitting in Shannon said, a 30-year-old building here now, or is that right? 36.
36.
So,
Yeah.
Our high schools are hitting the 36-year mark,
sure.
and in 14 years, that
Mhm.
50-year mark. That's just sort of how I.
Let's just kind of go around the table, Kathy. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
I guess my thought would be, we need to see some We know, I don't have it in front of me, but we know the substantial cost to repairing these two schools, but we don't have an idea of any kind of cost to rebuild or purchase land or do any of that. I guess we need to see
I think Mr. Wilson gave us a figure on new construction per square foot. Help me, Shannon. Was-
Did he?
Yeah, he did, because that question was asked.
Thinking he said it'd be $8 million, around $8 million to build a new school.
I think it was,
Yeah.
what did he say, 180, what did he say that new one was running, $185 a square foot?
But no, we're not talking about a mega school here. We're talking about, okay?
Oh,
Yeah, I'd like to see some numbers, some cost analysis. And you're saying that's been done before, but, you know, get down to the bare facts of it.
We couldn't build the land and the excavation, but we could do
Right.
the actual structure.
Yeah.
And have something to kind of operate from. And
That was using the same property.
yeah.
how much?
Yeah, it was
3.5
using the same
million.
Yeah.
property and building
Take
one the
half
same size as Kepler was 3.5 million.
Okay.
What was, that's why I thought.
Okay.
If you talk about, combining those two, you would need not quite, double the amount of, because you're gonna eliminate, two of your bigger areas, which is your, commons area and your, gymnasium. So, just for, let's take half over again, which would be 28,000 square feet.
Do we have any numbers on projected growth in those areas? The State Department, do they put anything like that out for?
We look at census, we follow the census just for the county. We possibly could look at,
The birth rate actually has decreased instead of increasing. We use that number to project classroom size, but
I seen
counties.
a report, and don't ask me where I seen it, it was on the state website of projected economic growth and residential growth. Residential growth follows the economic growth, and, for Hawkins County, it was projecting East Carter's Valley to be the next significant increase in residential living. I didn't know if there would be some support on the state level to see what we're looking at in those areas as far as,
Trying to project.
yeah.
Projections.
Refer from Shannon. Brandon, your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's feasible to fix what's there or build new. It's just a matter of, I don't have a personal opinion as to which happens. It's just, we have to find the money to do one or the other. Sure.
That's the big one.
Jackie?
I think we need to work with what's gonna be more feasible for the whole district as a whole. I mean, we could say tear a building down, restructure, rebuild, but how's it gonna work across the board? And like I said, getting the comparisons as to, cause I was remembering, when he came in, that he said it was gonna cost almost half the repair work there was to build a new school. And I was thinking, well, that's a no-brainer to me. With the years that he's, had talked about, that we were over the lifeline of the building. So I think we just have to get out of our comparison in numbers and start answering the hard questions.
Right. Yeah.
I've always had a problem with putting 5-year-olds on a bus for any longer than they're already on the bus. I mean, our buses are filled with high school kids. It's not a good situation for a child to start the day in more stress than they need to. And I think a longer bus ride for some of these kids is not conducive to learning. I also think that,
You're saying if we were to bus them to
yeah,
these
Bus-
schools, yeah.
busing them to Hawkins or
Sure.
JRP is adding more time to their day that's already,
Yeah.
yeah, they're, you add 15 more minutes for a baby, it's a long time, with noise, and so they come into school already ready to fight. I also think if schools don't change facilities, also where we have small rooms for group work. You know, those buildings were built when you had one classroom for everybody all day long. Now we need RTI, we need small group rooms, we need a media center, we need, lots of places for kids to do hands-on activities. To fix an old building and still end up with the same old building you have, only doable,
Right.
is, to me, not giving our kids the best thing we can give them. I just think that they deserve, our kids are poverty kids, they come out of poverty, especially in Kepler and Peters are a lot of poverty kids that need to be proud of their school.
Yeah.
They need to be proud of where they go. I can't see putting money into something and ending up with the same things they had 50 years ago.
Band-Aid.
Yeah.
I agree.
Before Wes gives us his thoughts on that, I'll take you back a few years ago when money was put into Clinch High School before the new school was built. There was significant monies invested in that old school, and you saw what happened after that. It was auctioned off, and it didn't bring hardly anything. So,
Lucky to sell it.
lucky to sell
Lucky
it.
to sell it, that's true.
I don't remember, maybe Jeff remembers an article, I wanna say $29,000 or something.
Yeah,
It wasn't much, was it?
25,
So
29.
I think,
That's what it's sold for?
yes. The
That's
whole
what, 14
school.
acres?
What?
And we invested hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to bring it up to specs.
Yeah.
So we don't wanna make another blunder like that.
And I'm glad to hear her perspective, I mean,
I know,
from the standpoint of the kids, cause you think about it, but, and put all that together with what it does to a kid during the day-to-day process.
We knew we were
They're learning.
we're right on the buckle as far as kids on the bus by transfer them. I think it's doable, but it's a long time to be on the bus. And if we can shorten the bus ride, you know, and make that student more conducive to learning first thing in the morning rather than being all torqued up and ready
That's what I'm
to.
saying, that's,
Yeah.
hadn't even given much
Upset.
thought to that.
We had, you know, originally, there was some of the people that were saying, well, let's just build it on the same property, and that poses another problem as well. Is if we move any farther toward the creek,
Yes,
we're in the floodplain.
yes.
We're on the cusp of that now. So, we would have to find new property.
Sure. And to try to move those two schools together to make it a school that would be fully funded would be a goal that we should seek.
yeah.
And consolidate staff and et cetera, cafeteria workers and maintenance and janitorial and supervision.
Well, from a maintenance standpoint, much like she said, once you get a certain age, your buildings cost you more to upkeep than you're really benefiting from.
Yeah.
All of our older schools, we have added electrical services. We have several that can't keep up with the technology that the kids need. I mean, we
It's not
can't.
built for it.
It's not built for it.
And like Chris was talking about, the new open design where you don't have to put in finished ceilings, you put in exposed beams, it's finished and it's got exposed ductwork and it's, you know, the designs has just improved. Wes, what's your thoughts?
This is first I've heard that as a potential option, so my
Didn't mean to
initial,
leave you out.
no, my initial thought is a question, is how do you zone the new school? If you build between Kepler and McFeeters Bend, because currently those two schools feed opposite ends of the county. So how do you zone them? Do you zone them for this end? Do you zone them for the other end? Do you have a scenario where Beth and I are sitting in class and I'm zoned for the east end and she's zoned for the west end? That happens in Knox County, I do know that. You can attend one middle school and the students go to two different high schools. So the zoning thing would be a question. I would have students that live on the town side of Kepler, for example. If, you know, we build a school halfway between, they travel there, it's not an issue traveling to elementary school. If they're zoned for the east end of the county, then they're gonna come to Churchill Intermediate, and then to Churchill Middle, and then to Volunteer. It's gonna be a distance that's greater than going to, you know, the other end of the county, and vice versa. There's students that live in the Christians Bend area going all the way down. It's not necessarily a deal breaker, it's just something to consider for how would you zone those kids, and then what impact, if you lived in that community, what would you do with your child? If I lived in Christians Bend and you zoned me for Cherokee, for example, probably not gonna go there.
That's a whole bus route.
I'm not gonna go there.
Yeah.
So, you know, currently, as far as the time on the bus goes,
My son's at basketball camp and it's over the lead.
Okay, all right. Do you need to see anything out there? If you're good for that?
Very
Okay.
familiar with it.
We have a recommendation, I guess, already on the table for Shannon. We're just gonna look at it next, so.
I wanna see projected growth numbers, is what I'd like to see, and I'd like to see what kind of numbers we're talking about in constructing a new school.
Okay. Our next step is to hold the public forum in the Kepler community, and, not that we wanna throw this out on the table, but again, we need to be thinking and brainstorming.
We'd have to include McFeeters Bend too, wouldn't we, in any kind of a meeting like that, or not necessarily?
At this stage, this is just a whim that Chris presented to me, and I thought more about it, and I know he may have talked about it some more, so it's just a whim, and, but it may be something we need to explore, and it tackles two different issues that I think we're gonna eventually, probably not this board, but a board will have to address it eventually, those two schools, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks,
see you.
Chris.
Now you give it back.
So the zoning
Took
issue,
yours,
you think would
didn't
be a challenge? Is it an impossible hurdle?
no, I just, it'd be something to have to think through,
Okay.
where you're gonna send those kids, cause
Probably not unique to us though, is it?
no,
We could
of course not.
borrow off other districts and see what they did. Does Sullivan or Green or anybody else run into this?
I mean, actually, I think if you look at Sullivan County and Greene County,
They're
beginning
400
to
square miles, yeah.
to consolidate schools, most likely to save money in the long run,
Yeah.
so, you know, we could check with them and see how they're planning on approaching that.
This discussion probably caused the land prices in McFeeters Bend area to go up.
Well, there's only 6 people watching.
Okay.
Might get lucky.
But again, we're brainstorming, and any ideas that you can bring to the table would be appreciated. So, thank you, everybody, for being here. Let's move outside and then we'll adjourn, okay?
I know. Like I was 90-year-old time I got checked. Thank you.
Good article on the World War II veteran.
Oh, good.
I enjoyed reading that. That was a great story.
Yeah.
The chips.
Okay, go. Y'all playing?
Shoot, I got about 6 stories out of this meeting. I didn't realize what I was getting into. Oh,
You retired, you didn't know what to do.
Sure, that's it. That's it. You don't have any ready.
thank you.
I should have stayed. The bank, we still got a check for being crazy. Crazy for free, crazy for free, yeah.
Move into the varsity. Been up there plumbing and.
My weekends in jail. I'm sorry, I'm holding beach in the bag, chip. Let's go to the bathroom. Joe kids out of the Here.
were practicing earlier. Practice is over.
Dusty, our grandparents kept it, you always have an expiration date. When y'all going back?
Dolly's for about 4 hours yesterday, and he's a one-man record break. I'm telling you.
How does it get to the top? Where's the ladder? He said it goes to the top of the.
It's on the other end.
Barn.
Can we get around?
Oh, that grass. Do they water?
Yes. To this one.
Oh, really?
If you look,
My yard's so crunchy.
these are the cracks
You know
I'm
what
talking
you're talking
about.
about? Okay, I
These are
figured it was
actually,
it.
these are actually precast panels that are just set on a grade beam. If you look down in there, you can actually see the grade beam. It's the concrete underneath with the steel on the front here. That stair steps all the way down. They seem to be fine. That's also where the water's going. Okay, we can't just seal those up with concrete because these actually move. They don't just sit still. They actually move.
So if we close it up and the water's going off the face of this, then would it be just displaced so much it wouldn't be an issue for it to go off like that? Is that what you're thinking?
Well, it'll go all the way down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we got a catch drain.
Yeah, we've got a drain down there. Well, that's where it goes to now.
Right.
Originally, it drained underneath, and then if you go down on that front wall, there was actually drains at the front wall where the water was supposed to come out the bottom of the wall. It's supposed to just run down the bank and come out the bottom of the wall. Well, so much dirt has been moved down there over the years, those drains are plugged. So now it comes out between the bottom wall and that first bleacher.
So where that
If you
mud
can see
look
that
like
mud
the
right there in the
stain?
center, that's a real bad spot, which is directly in front of the press box, which is where the majority of the mud comes from. Now, if you'll look, you can't really tell so much by just looking at the wall, but if you see the corners here are fine. It hasn't broke, which is why we thought there was just a rotation of that top parapet. Because inside, and we can walk in there.
Scary.
It's gonna be dark in there.
I don't do scary movies.
Okay, so you really don't think there's much movement on that floor. Now this is where you can start telling. See how much that's moved out? That used to be attached. Now look right above that doorway at the crack. So from here that way, this part of the building is actually rotating this way.
It's just piers up there.
Shannon, put that in my book. See, right there's what makes me nervous. If it's like this right here with
Now in here you can tell.
Oh, wow.
Where this is why we thought it was just the front wall that was rotating, but it's not. It's actually all structure.
Oh.
So the plan, as you saw that concrete wall that's out front, hampers us we would have to remove that wall in order to get piers in and outside. So the plan is to come in here and actually take this counter out and cut the holes in the floor and take those augers in straight inside.
Okay.
And lift that back
What kind
up.
of machine are we talking about to get in here? Is this just a handheld machine or something? Or is it?
No, they'll actually. Well, I don't know how they'll do it. I'm not gonna say.
I'm thinking big drilling rig or something.
It won't, no, I mean, they're augers, they're only about that big around.
Yeah. Precast concrete, that's what you're talking about overhead.
Yeah, these are precast concrete panels, which if you look, they're actually running wrong way. They're not running back. So this wall is technically not a bearing wall. It could go. It can fall off.
Okay. I guess that's enough for me for one day. I still gotta go to Rogersville to the solid waste committee. They decide if they're gonna hire another person to watch the inmates at the recycling center.
You need to recycle the plastic.
Yeah.
Is this concessions?
Yes.
Yeah, well.
Now concessions is fine.
They're gonna try to do away with drinking straws, but yet they're gonna leave
But you can-
plastic bottles,
you
you
can
know,
see-
and it doesn't make.
See separation there, and it's separated here. It's actually from the concession stands forward. Oh yeah, this side's fine. This side's not moved at all. It's just the
Yeah,
coaches.
I don't either. I don't either.
Right.
Now, if you wanna walk around to the other side,
Has this camp always been that far
Yes.
too?
well,
some poison
I
ivy
won't say it's been that much. A lot of them, they've had
Picking
boards
flowers
in
over
them,
there.
there's expansion. You gotta have expansion joints, but they're also the source of a lot of problems. You'll either make one or they'll make their own.
All right. I'm gonna skedaddle. I'll see y'all later.
Bye. And, yeah, like I say, take it easy on me.
Take it easy. You didn't do nothing. You're all right.
All right.